Last week, a tragedy hit a Malaysian school, and it was just shocking. A 14-year-old boy stabbed and killed a 16-year-old girl. And, the news just sent this wave of grief and confusion all across the country, leaving every single one of us asking one very, very difficult question.
Why? I mean, what could possibly drive a young person to do something so violent? That's really the question at the heart of all this. And today, we're going to try and find the real answer. And believe me, it is so much more complicated than what the headlines are telling us.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The moment the news broke, the internet just exploded with reactions like these, right? Bring back canon in schools, or blaming it all on anime, or, the classic, banned violent video games. Look, these are easy answers. They come from a place of shock, of anger, and that's understandable. But they don't actually get us any closer to the truth. To find that, we've got to go deeper.
And here's where the story takes a turn. The real motive, the real story, it wasn't found in interviews or background checks, not at first. The most important clue was actually found on the perpetrator himself, and it turned this case from what seemed like random violence into something way more chilling.
A note. They found a note in his pocket, and on that note was a list of names. Not his friends, not his family, no. These names were a direct message. It was like a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight into a very dark corner of the internet that has been inspiring violence for decades.
These were the first two names on that list. Now, for those of you who might not know, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were the two students behind the 1999 Columbine High School massacre in the United States. This wasn't just a random name drop, it was a tribute, a deliberate one. And they weren't the only names on that list.
The note also mentioned the names of the attackers from two other infamous U.S. school shootings, Seung-Hee Cho from Virginia Tech and Adam Lanza from Sandy Hook. In fact, the perpetrator even carved Adam Lanza's name onto his weapon. So what's crucial to understand here is that this act, it wasn't an isolated incident. It was an imitation. It was his entry into a really disturbing online subculture.
And this brings us to a term you've probably never heard before, but it is absolutely central to understanding this tragedy. This online community is known as the Columbiners.
So what are Columbiners? Well, basically, they're people who obsessively study the original Columbine shooters. They read their diaries, they watch the videos that Harris and Klebold left behind, videos where they talked all about their hatred for society and how they felt like outcasts. And in this subculture, these two aren't seen as villains. They're seen as misunderstood anti-heroes.
Now, this is where it gets really unsettling. Academics have actually broken down this group into different types. It usually starts with the researchers, people who are just morbidly fascinated by the case. Then you get the fangirls, who literally romanticize the killers, even writing fan fiction about them. It gets much, much darker with the supporters, who actively cheer on and encourage others who are thinking about violence. And then finally, you have the copycats, who see murder as their way to get into this twisted hall of fame.
So why? Why would anyone join this? You have to understand, for teenagers who feel totally isolated or bullied or just misunderstood by the entire world, this subculture offers them a really powerful sense of belonging. It validates their pain, it tells them their anger is justified, and that violence is a legitimate way to respond. For a vulnerable young person, this is an incredibly dangerous rabbit hole to fall down.
Okay, let's just pause here for a second. If this breakdown is giving you a clearer picture of what's really happening, hit that like and subscribe button. That way you'll always stay ahead on Malaysia's biggest issues.
The Columbiners are a terrifying example, for sure, but they are not alone. They're part of a much bigger ecosystem of toxic online subcultures that can seriously warp a young person's entire worldview.
You might have actually heard of some of these. There's incel culture, where men who feel rejected by women channel all that frustration into a really violent hatred. Or there's bread pill ideology, which pushes this narrative that men are the real victims in modern society. And you even have accelerationists who are so nihilistic they just want to cause chaos to watch the world burn. All of these are just traps waiting online for lonely and angry young people.
So, knowing that the real problem is this deep, deep feeling of being alienated, what are the real solutions? It means we have to move way beyond those easy answers we talked about at the start.
Think about it. Caning a teenager who already feels oppressed by the world, that's just going to deepen their hatred. Banning games or anime? That ignores the fact that for many kids, these communities can be a positive source of friendship and belonging. And a blanket ban on social media is it's too blunt. The real work, the harder work, is about building emotional safety nets, encouraging real-world friendships, and teaching empathy from a really young age.
This quote, it really just gets to the heart of it all.
The solution isn't some new law or another ban. It's a change in our culture. It's about checking in on the quiet kid in class. It's about parents, teachers, and friends creating an environment where a struggling teenager feels seen and cared for, not pushed into a corner where these dark ideologies start to look attractive.
Of course, there's still the question of justice. So what happens to the 14-year-old perpetrator now? Well, this is what Malaysian law has to say.
Okay, so because he's a minor, he cannot be sentenced to death, but because the crime is so severe, his case will be heard in a normal court, not a juvenile one. The most likely outcome here is what's called indefinite detention. That means he'll be held in a facility for an unspecified amount of time. His case would then be reviewed every year by a board, and that board could decide to keep him in detention or, eventually, recommend his release back into society.
Thanks for sticking with us through this tough topic. If you believe in getting clarity over confusion, join thousands of Malaysians right here by tapping like and hitting subscribe. Let's keep making sense of these important issues together.
This case is a massive wake-up call for all of us. The ideologies that fueled this tragedy, yeah, they were imported from overseas. But the feelings of isolation and anger that allowed them to take root, those can be found anywhere, including right here at home. The justice system will do its thing for this one person. But the bigger question for the rest of us is this: what are we going to do to defuse the next bomb before it goes off?